Hello and welcome back to another Tea Time with me, Meoni. I'm Meoni and this is my tea time. So grab yourself a beverage of choice and join me as we sip along to some news and some discussion, but usually I don't get to share with my audience because I'm incapable of live streaming with my current bandwidth, which hopefully will be fixed in the future. So this time around, it's basically going to be another recap of what's going on recently with me, and indeed the activity on Final Fantasy XIV, and basically all of the things I'm excited for, and there is actually some negatives to talk about today as well. Firstly, it needs to be said that it's one of the hottest summers we've ever had in the UK, and a lot of my time outside of the game, and indeed YouTube, has been dedicated to just enjoying the summer weather before it all goes again, because it won't be around forever, and usually we have this sort of like short stint of heat, and then we get back towards sort of like the October time, and it's just gone instantly. Our summer times have become shorter and shorter, but invariably hotter and hotter each year, and this year has been incredibly hot and humid, as you no doubt are aware if you're from this country. In fact, the whole world has seen record highs this year, but specifically in the UK with our hottest ever day a couple of weeks ago, and it was incredibly sweltering, upwards of 30-something in my studio. I had fans running, it was ridiculous. So as you can imagine, a lot of content creators that you watch are more likely to have their windows open and probably make a little less content this summer, just simply because of how unbearable it is to stand in front of a computer with all of the windows shut to avoid the noise of mowers and other activities that people like to do in the summer weather. Especially in England, we have this sort of addiction to mowing the lawn every day, and or like screaming, which is always fun, especially when you're trying to record and someone's screaming down the road. But then again, I live in the country, so I can imagine that it would be much worse in a city. In Final Fantasy XIV then, to celebrate this hot and humid season we've been living through, has been the Moonfire Fair. I was going to put up a video of me getting to the top and struggling along the way. Unfortunately, that footage got corrupted, and I'm not really sure what the heck happened with that. It was a bit unfortunate, but really it wasn't much more than me just complaining as I was jumping up the tower. I did manage to get to the top eventually, but I'm not going to do it again, especially when we only have a very limited amount of time left of this day, considering that later today we get the Rising event for 2019. This time around, I was quite interested in the Rising event, considering the sort of images and the sort of story they're going for this time around. Without delving too deep into this, they launched this developer blog, which was 6 years all the richer, and they talked about essentially that this year you'll be helping clean up after the Moonfire Fair, which is a very different sort of storyline to go for, and is, I'd like to say, a lot more environmentally aware than I expected them to go. You'll be helping Pobbiano in Costa del Sol actually clean up after the mess. There are even images where you're actually going around and picking up on the shoreline, which is a very different sort of direction, and like I say, quite environmentally conscious, which is something I didn't really initially expect from Final Fantasy, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And ultimately the reward for helping out and cleaning up the environment is this brave new Y'shtola minion. I cannot wait to get my hands on this. I think Y'shtola's new Black Mage look is probably one of the most iconic things to come out of 14 in such a long time. Apparently there are plans for this costume to be available for players in the game at some point, as Yoshi P mentioned in the last live letter. There's been a lot of demand, including from himself, to be able to wear that amazing looking outfit. And we get this minion today as the main reward from this new Rising event. So yeah, I'm hoping it has some interesting interactions. But again, we have to wait until 4 PM BST to actually access this event today. So you should be assured that I will have videos on that when that goes live. In addition to that, obviously, if you didn't already know, we also get some of the 4.1 and 4.5 artwork for the various Stormblood patch cycle content, and there's some really good posters, including some of my favourite art, that also available in the Stormblood art book, which is a fantastic thing to have. But now you can actually put these on your wall. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for that. So what else has been happening in Final Fantasy XIV's community? Now recently, I have to touch on this a little bit because it was a subject that was brought up by various different podcasters in the Final Fantasy XIV community and beyond that. And that is including but not limited to the quote that people are claiming that the use of ACT, i.e. the third-party tool to parse content and show DPS meters from the game, creates toxicity and elitism, and there's also talk recently in the social community of further elitism of outlawing certain classes or jobs from pug groups due to their performance on ACT, and indeed World of Logs. I am of course talking about the recent outlawing of astrologians in the pug community from E4S, which is an interesting topic in on its own, but I'd like to start this by saying that really the toxicity in Final Fantasy XIV is born out of the people individually, and I wouldn't really say that the entire community is a very toxic one in general. In fact, we have some of the most lovable people in the world, and some of the people in the top tier raiding guilds and, groups and link shells we call them in this game if you're unfamiliar, are actually really lovely people, and they're just dedicated to what they do to try and push for world first. That's not to say that everyone is a lovable, huggable person, but, there are always those people in every game, and I think this time around just drawing onto that toxicity as a subject is kind of taking away from the overall experience. I think a lot of people who have come from other games such as World of Warcraft sometimes get a lot of flack for being from WoW, and a lot of people like to use them as the excuse that they brought the toxicity, but in general it's always been there, and elitism there as well has always been in line with that. It's whether or not you yourself are capable of putting up with other people's behavior, and a lot of the time a lot of people try to join statics of their own or create them so that they can avoid that, and that's something I would still recommend to this day. Ever since 1.0 people have been like this. There have been people outlawing or excluding people because of the meta, and the meta is fine for world first progression, but past that, everything is killable with every job in the game, simply because that's the way it was designed. So if people want to play Astrologian, I don't really see the problem with it. There's a lot of skilled people who will tell you how good they are with an Astrologian, and they can prove that. It doesn't necessarily mean that their job as a whole is completely terrible, and certainly not for pug content. We're so many weeks into progression now that it's all been cleared, all the world firsts are done within the first week. There's not really much excuse for using the meta to exclude someone from content. In general, the only thing you should really use as an excuse is whether or not it's worth continuing with your attempts if someone is messing up the mechanics badly. A lot of gear, especially pentamelded stuff and indeed the deep shadow stuff, which if you have been progressing your character anyway, you will have enough to actually survive most mechanics, and really it comes down to skill for the most part, and then the rest of it is just gearing up casually on the side. A full set of deep shadow gear will take you a few weeks, indeed a couple of months, but that's not to say that it's not possible to do without even touching the raid content, because it's all done with tomestones that are available from such a wide variety of content, and that's intentional for the game design. There's a reason these tomestones are awarded for frontline victories, for example. Even though PvP isn't related to PvE, it is still something incentivized, and the developers knew that people would want to do this to actually cap on their tomes. Whichever's the easiest way is usually how people do it, either through 4-man content back to back, or through their main scenario and the other roulettes per day, and that's how it will always be. To exclude someone based on their item level is also completely ridiculous, considering the item level requirements I've seen in pug groups have gone up and up recently for no particular reason. And in general, if pugging is getting you down, the best solution would be to join a static. There's a lot of people I talk to regularly, including some in my FC, who say that they don't like raiding simply because of the toxicity. But in general, they're talking about pugging, doing it with random people, which I always say is never a good idea if you've got really thin skin. That's not to say it's not completely possible to pug all of the content in Savage and clear it. In fact, a lot of people have already done that. I'm just saying that if you have problems, and if you want to work with a team that are at your skill level, and indeed at your behavior levels, then you might want to consider actually joining your own static with some friends, if you can make some, and make a think of it that way. I would just recommend joining a group or making one yourself with your group of friends, and at least then you can have a laugh, you can work it out together and progress, which is entirely what I've done with my own static. Now, if you're after instant clears of something, then obviously, pugging isn't really going to be the answer, and you need to sort of shop around for a static that's sort of at your level and shares your experience, but you can't expect to be carried through the content, and when somebody has a complaint about you in a pug, it's really, it's going to happen. People complain about my healing all the time, regardless of what actually happened in the fight. It's a culture that's gone hand in hand with playing with other players in MMOs of any genre for the longest time since their creation. So I don't really think this toxicity and elitism thing is anything new, and is certainly not the main focus of Final Fantasy XIV's community, when in reality, if you step back and look at the other aspects of the community itself, you can see how much that people put into this, how much passion they put into separate projects, outside of just the hardcore side of things or the end game. When it comes down to particular sort of jokes or in-jokes about particular jobs or classes, I mean, the instant one that comes to mind is the meme about Dragoons basically tanking the floor and dying all the time. Yes, I mean, even I am guilty of using that meme and joking around with my own FC members and static members about Dragoons just tanking the floor and dying. But in general, some of the Dragoons I've met have been some of the most hard-working sort of people to try and push their DPS and improve. They're incredibly skilled, and I don't really see the difference between a healer dying and a Dragoon dying, and I think a lot of people are maybe picking up on those memes and taking them a little bit too far. Remember, there is a code of conduct when you're actually talking to people in a pug. You have to remember this is someone on the other side of a computer, the other end, and that you have to kind of be careful what you say in chat, because not everyone shares the same amount of humor as you do. And in recent times, they've actually been banning people for sort of like false accusations and stuff like that. In general, it's better off just to sort of be polite and work through stuff yourself. And if you've got something negative to say, just don't say it, and keep that to private channels if you can at all times. But I don't know why we're really having this discussion, but everybody seems to be having it of late, and toxicity and elitism is the latest thing to talk about. But in reality, it's not any different than when the game first came out, and I think it's just 2019 bleeding into people, where everybody has to be super sensitive and complain about things that have been there forever. I don't get it, and I probably never will. So let's move on to something more interesting for me personally, and that's talking about Anunnaki. Anunnaki was given to me by Square Enix for free. I will be having a video review on that, sort of like an impressions review. I was going to have an impressions out already, because I played about an hour of it previously, and I thought I was ready to give my impressions, but in reality, I want to see more of the game before I can really come up with some kind of conclusion as to what I dislike about the game. I've not seen enough of it to really say I completely can't stand this feature, for example. And I have a lot to say about it, so you should definitely stay tuned for that. I should have that video out probably at the end of the week, maybe this week, or even early next week, but I'm not in a rush. A lot of people have been rushing their impressions and reviews out, but in general, I like to sort of take my time and soak it in and really sort of analyze things a little bit more than most people probably have the time to do. But yeah, it's a really good game so far. So I've got a bullet point here about upcoming releases. Really, the only thing I'm super excited for now is Final Fantasy VIII's remaster, coming out the 3rd of September. This costs £16, I think it's $15.99 on the United Kingdom Steam store. It's available for PlayStation, for Nintendo Switch. I'm not sure about Xbox actually now I think about it. And of course PC on Steam. I recently purchased this straight away, this pre-order, mostly because I really wanted to support this remaster. This isn't something I would recommend you doing. Obviously pre-orders are dangerous territory, but when you know that you're going to love a game in particular, sometimes you just have to put out the money and, you just can't resist. And in this case, I couldn't resist, especially from the trailer footage and the images they've put on their own website for Final Fantasy VIII's remaster so far. Just looking at Squall's face for the first time in like proper rendered 3D that doesn't look like a cardboard box, The difference in graphical fidelity this time around is phenomenal. I'm not sure to the extent of how far that's going to go, whether they've done all of the characters. Some people have got a lot of negative things to talk about. There are rumours that not all of the characters have been remastered in that way. But we have a few things that we can definitely say are brilliant. Firstly, we're having the original PlayStation 1 music included instead of the MIDI crap that the previous Steam version of Final Fantasy VIII, the normal version, which is still on sale, has. Nobody wants to hear the MIDI versions of those songs. It was one of the worst things they ever did with the ports of Final Fantasy games, and I'm very happy that they've decided to include the proper music for it that we all know and love. So in general, the soundtrack isn't remastered in any way. It's just that PS1 soundtrack, how it should be from the start. Other things that have sort of, stressed people out is that they're kind of confusing what a remaster actually is. They're confusing a remaster with a remake, and a lot of people are saying, oh, it's going to have the junction system and the draw system. Oh, I hated that about Final Fantasy VIII. They could have at least changed that and added some new gameplay features. Instead, they focus on just adding cheats. Whilst there's an actual cheat menu to sort of make it so there's no encounters, maximum gil, that sort of stuff, they've done that in all of the other games that they've re-released on other platforms. They're there for people who just want to relive the storyline as fast as they can without having to do anything else in the game. And that should be an option for a game like this. It's not like this is a brand new game. It might be to some people, but to have that choice, I guess, is a lot better than not having it. In terms of reworks of the actual gameplay, I don't think many people would agree with reworking everything in a remaster. If you're going to rework a game and, remake it, like Final Fantasy VII is being remade, then that's your opportunity to change things, in the development cycle, to change the creation aspects of it, such as a materia system and how things work and look in Final Fantasy VII for better or worse. You've still got the original game if you want to play it. It is not a remaster, it is a Final Fantasy VII remake. With Final Fantasy VIII, this is a remaster, and there are parts that are remastered and some parts that are not, like I said with the music. They're not about to just change the junction system and rip out the draw system just because of critical acclaim or people who don't like something. This is not something necessary for a remaster. And whilst that confusion is there, I do understand the complaints, but you have to accept a game for how it was, flaws and all, warts and all. It's how the game was made, it's how the game gained its negative points and its positive points. To change that would be to remake it, I don't know, people are stupid, and in general, so far the Steam page for Final Fantasy VIII Remaster is complete garbage when you look at the community section. There's a lot of naysaying that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Final Fantasy VIII is a fantastic game, it is not a perfect game, and in general, that's the version I personally want from a remaster. If I was to remake the game and it was titled a remake, then there are a lot of elements I would change, especially the draw system, make it a little bit more convenient, allow for more magics to be stocked at once from a draw point, stuff like that, little things like that. But in general, the game was a lot of fun. I'm expecting mostly just a visual improvement, so I can actually share that experience with more people, because a lot of people today expect a visual sort of graphical experience, and if something looks like a complete cardboard box and you can't tell where his eyes are in a ballroom scene, then the famous meme about Renoa saying, "You're the cutest guy here." Yeah, that one there that I've put on screen. It's fantastic, but it's going to be nice to see, as you can see here in this image, actually see the visual details that they were not able to do originally, which is how you remaster a game to make it possible for you to enjoy what was already there in the core concept, but a whole nother time again, but better. But in general, like I said before, people are stupid, they don't really know what they want, and they'll complain about it even if they did change something. There's two sides to every coin, but in general, if you're going to change things, that'd be a remake. But I'm all for a Final Fantasy VIII remake if they wanted to do what they've done with 7. My goodness, I would fully support that every inch, because I would still, at the end of the day, have my original game and my original copy on the PS1, and I wouldn't care anymore if it was trash or not on the new version. And that's just how I am. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this tea time. There's a bit of negativity, but I just sort of wanted to get it off my chest of how I feel at the moment about the current community discussions in various Square Enix properties. And yeah, so thank you kindly for watching. Hopefully this has been enjoyable in some way. And wherever you're traveling to, or if you're listening to this on your computer, have a great day. Enjoy the Rising event, and I'll see you all next time.